y'all? How's everybody been doing? How's everybody been doing? So we are back again. Tonight is Monday, and currently headed up to Jacksonville, leaving out of Orlando. And we're gonna hope for a better week. Exactly a week ago, it's a pretty bad night. You know, I had started here in Orlando, of course. They had sent me from Orlando over to Tampa to Jacksonville. I sat in Jacksonville about just shy of 3 hours, which is usually the norm when I go to Jacksonville. I usually sit there anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 hours, because their break bulk closeout is pretty late. And when I left out of Jacksonville, they sent me, of course, empty to our Atlanta break bulk. That's usually the case when I go to Jacksonville. I almost always will go up there, either loaded or empty. I'll sit for about 3 hours, and then around 3:30, they'll say, all right, grab a set of empties, go up to ATV, and they'll usually lay me down, or they'll send me to West Atlanta or North Atlanta. That's usually the routine when I go to Jacksonville, and I imagine tonight will be no different. But anyway, when I had left out of Jacksonville, as soon as I got on 75 headed north, my check engine light came on. So I called the Orlando shop. I just asked them to see what's going on, because since we have Samsara, they're able to they can actually see what fault codes the truck currently has. And you know, they said, you know, you should be good. If anything, you might lose your cruise control, worst case scenario. Now, I'm gonna just give y'all a backstory on this truck. You know, I've been driving this particular truck for over a year now. I've been assigned to this truck for over a year, and you know, when it's not in the shop, it runs pretty good. You know, it can maintain a solid 67. You know, it's a pretty good truck, but unfortunately, you know, it has been giving me, you know, some issues. It's mainly with the accelerator pedal. And, you know, this truck unfortunately is, you know, no stranger to the shop. You know, it's been, and for those who don't know, I run the system, so I go, you know, everywhere within, you know, the company. You know, we have 90 terminals, and I can say I've been to almost every single one. There's maybe 6 terminals out of those 90 that I haven't been to yet. But this truck has been, of course, in the Orlando shop. It's seen the Tampa shop, Fort Lauderdale. It's been in West Palm. It's been in Memphis. You know, it's been in all of the Atlanta terminals. It's been in Charlotte. It's been in Raleigh. You know, and I'm sure I'm leaving a few out, but you know, like I said, this truck is no stranger to the shop. And they said, you know, you should be able to still make it. I get maybe 10 miles after I got off the phone with the shop, and you know, the same thing that happened maybe a month ago when I broke down in Atlanta. You know, every light known to man came on the dash, and you know, I started dropping speed. You know, not my doing, but it just started dropping speed, and it eventually got me down to 5 miles an hour. And you know, my biggest thing is trying to get off the interstate, because you guys know as well as I know, when it comes to people being on the shoulder, a lot of people don't follow the move over law. You know, in the state of Florida, which by the way, that's where I broke down in Florida, you know, they recently changed it to now it's anybody on the shoulder, anybody. Before it used to be emergency vehicle. Now anything that's on the shoulder, you must move over one lane, and if you can't move over, you have to drop your speed. And of course, a lot of people, of course, don't do that, you know. And I ended up, the truck gave out, you know, maybe 1.5 miles of an exit, you know. The code that kept coming up was J1939, I think it is, but it's basically, to sum it up, it has something to do with my accelerator. Ended up calling, you know, Central, of course. You know, I let them know what's going on, and I let them know, you know, I can't drive this truck, you know. And I was only maybe 20 miles from Valdosta. So they had to, you know, tow. I ended up sitting on the shoulder 8 hours. And the original plan was they were just gonna have somebody from Val bring me a truck. That way, you know, I can continue on up to Atlanta. But being though that Val is a small terminal, and the time that I broke down, you know, that's right around the time where they start assigning, you know, trucks to the P&E guys. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get a truck to me, so ultimately, you know, I had to, you know, sit on the shoulder and, you know, wait for that tow truck. And being though that it was the early hours, you know, they were having a hard time finding a tow company to come out there to me, because keep in mind it was also, you know, Veterans Day, if that matters. But I don't know if that maybe played a factor, but point is they had a hard time finding a wrecker. And yeah, I didn't get back to Valdosta just shy of 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And of course I had a weight in violation. They were also going to, at one point they said, we're just gonna tow the truck back to Orlando. Now keep in mind, y'all, I'm pretty much on the border of the Florida-Georgia border. And they would have said, of course, if they would have towed me back, of course, I would not have been able to run that night. And when they did, you know, the shift change, they end up just saying, you know, just have them tow me to Val, went to bed in Val. And I couldn't start, you know, until my 10, so I didn't leave out of Valdosta until midnight. Oh, let me backtrack. When I got to Val, they had a on-site mechanic there. He said he would take a look at it, see what he can do, because Valdosta, of course, they don't have an on-site shop. So when I got up, I started the truck up. The check engine light was not there, was not on. I had called the Orlando shop. I said, hey, can y'all, you know, run the truck number, see if you see any fault codes. They was like, no, you're good. And I just so happened to be going to West Palm that night, so I had the idea, and I told the shop, I'm like, listen, I have to pass Orlando anyway, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna bring this truck here and grab an Orlando spare. That way I'm not using a Valdosta spare. That way you guys can actually like look at it and, you know, figure out what's going on, because this same code keeps coming up, you know, time and time again. I get into Lake City and the same thing happens. The truck, you know, fails on me again, so I'm on the side of the road. Fortunately, I only waited, I left the truck off for about 15-20 minutes, and I restarted the truck. All the codes cleared, and I just continued on, because I told myself I will be damned if I sit on the shoulder 2 nights in a row. Like, you're not gonna give it to me like that. Absolutely not. So I end up making it to Orlando, and as soon as I get in the gate, you know, it fails on me again. But this time, you know, I'm like, at least I'm here. I can limp it to the shop. And I get in that spare, which y'all saw on my community tab, that international, and I just stayed in that truck for the remainder of the week. And when I got to West Palm, you know, I called corporate. I spoke with the fleet services, like the head guy of fleet services. And I pretty much just asked them, like, listen, this truck has been nothing but problems. Like, is there a way I can just get reassigned, you know, to a different truck? Because when it comes to, you know, truck assignments, when new trucks come, you know, that's not done in-house. That's all done, you know, through corporate. So I spoke with him. You know, he made the phone calls that he needed to make. Ultimately, you know, it hasn't hit the mileage to where I can get a new truck yet, and it's not at the point where it'll get turned into a P&D truck just yet, but they were able to figure out, you know, the root of the problem, and it's all it is, you know, it's just some bad wiring, I guess the wire harness. So they replaced all the wires. It was actually finished this past Friday, but the manager in Orlando, the shop manager, he basically said, you know, it's good to go. We're gonna run it in the city just to make sure that there's no issues. So he said, you know, just continue using the spare, and then you can use your assigned truck Monday, which is of course tonight. So hopefully, you know, everything is fixed just like they said, and you know, that's what's been going on with it, you know. I'm currently sitting at, you know, 464,000 miles, so I'm not too far off before they're gonna turn this into a P&D unit. But yeah, that's pretty much what's been going on. So as I said earlier, I'm gonna head up to Jax, and I will tune back in with y'all probably when I get up to Jacksonville. Tuesday night, all hooked up, got to head out. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick it up from this point in the next one. So as I always tell y'all, thank you to all my day one subscribers. Thank you to all my new subscribers. Appreciate all y'all. And as I always tell y'all, y'all take it easy and y'all stay safe.